Technically, it isn't summer yet, but summer break is here, so we are soaking up early summer in the kitchen. Zucchini and peaches are some of the earliest simple summer pleasures here, so today I'm sharing how we make the most out of these seasonal harvests from the farmer's market and from our garden. One of my goals for this year is to can enough of the foods that we really love to last us for a year. And one of the foods that we cannot get enough of, especially my 3-year-old, is peaches. And we are really lucky because we live close to the border of South Carolina, and South Carolina peaches are delicious. So last year and this year, I bought peaches from a local farmer's market at a wholesale price. So sometimes if you go to your local farmer's market or even to a local farm, they will sell their produce at a cheaper price if you buy a lot of it. So I was able to get these peaches at a really good price, and I am going to can them. Now, this batch of peaches is not enough to last us for a full year, especially because I think my child could eat a full jar of peaches every single day. But what I do is every week or every few weeks while peaches are in season, I get a big basket of them like this, and then I can them throughout the season. I am not a master food preservationist. There are people who actually are master food preservationists. They have certificates in it and they know a lot more than I do. I follow all of the instructions to a T from the National Center for Home Food Preservation because they are tested recipes. So I'm going to leave the links for that in the description box below. So if you want to learn how to can peaches, it's probably best, and well, it's actually for sure best that you learn from an expert. But I will show you here just sort of what I do along the way. Here I am just putting the peaches in boiling water for about 45 seconds and taking them out and then putting them directly into cold water. And this helps the skin release. And one thing you should know about canning peaches, and this is true for tomatoes too, is it's like a wet, sloppy mess. You have your water bath canner, then you have the boiling water, then you have ice water, and then another bowl of water to put your sliced peaches in, and the peaches themselves are messy. So do be prepared for a little bit of a messy, wet kitchen. But you can see here that when the peaches are ripe, the skins slip right off. When they're not ripe, and I made this mistake with a couple of them, the skins are still a little hard to take off. I work with the peaches in batches, and while I am doing that, I also have the jars in the dishwasher. And that may or may not be necessary depending on the guidelines for your recipe. Just check out the recipe and the National Center for Home Food Preservation for that. But I keep my jars in the garage, so they just need to be washed. And once they are done in the dishwasher, I'm now loading them up into my water bath canner just to keep them warm because I will be doing a hot pack for the peaches, so I need hot jars to put hot food in to prevent the jars from breaking. The reason I even started canning food and peaches in the first place is because last year when my daughter was 2, she was just housing peaches. And I looked at the ingredients for canned peaches because I was buying like the pre-canned or jarred peaches. And I just wasn't super excited about the amount of sugar that was in them. So I decided to can my own. And what I like about this is, yes, you do can them in a syrup, but you can can them in an extra light syrup. So the National Center for Home Food Preservation has different recipes for different syrups, ranging from extra light all the way to a heavy syrup. So this is the extra light syrup. It's 6.5 cups of water and 3/4 cups of sugar for the entire batch of peaches. While these peaches come to a boil, I'm going to get all of the other supplies ready. And that is a useful tip for canning, is just to make sure you have all the things you need ready to go. It's not like a super rushed or time sensitive project necessarily, but there are a lot of moving parts and it's just a lot easier if you have everything ready to go. I can most of my food in small batches because that's how much time I have. So this small batch of peaches I did between the time I brought my daughter home from preschool and it was time to take her to gymnastics. And then I did the rest of the peaches after she went to bed. Now that may or may not work for everyone. It's technically maybe a little more time consuming that way, but it's the only way this works for my schedule. So one of the things that I really want to emphasize here is that if you are interested in things like food preservation and canning food for yourself and your family, but feel like you just don't have time to do it, there are ways just to do it in small batches in the pockets of time that you can. And maybe you don't have food prepared for a year, and that's okay. But maybe you can preserve just a little bit of food to enjoy as a treat throughout the year. That's a totally great and viable option. I don't really stockpile a ton of food. I do try to keep a year's worth of some foods in our house, things like peaches and tomatoes, things that we consume a lot of that I could either get from the farmer's market or my own garden and keep around. But honestly, I don't really have this space in my pantry to have a year's worth of everything. So even if you're just canning a little bit of stuff here and there, or just canning a year's worth of your favorite things, that's a great option. I really wanted to learn how to can food like 10 years ago. That was like on my bucket list to preserve my own food, but I actually felt really intimidated by the process. But it's actually very simple once you know what to do. And it can feel intimidating in the beginning, but if you follow a tested recipe, follow the National Center for Home Food Preservation, and also Ball has really good recipes that are tested too. They are easy and simple. And if you're canning or preserving things that you really love and that you'll actually consume throughout the year, it is not wasted effort and is not wasted time. It is so awesome in the middle of January on a cold winter's day to open up a can of tomatoes or peaches that you canned in the summer. There's nothing like it. Other than peaches, the name of the game right now in our early summer kitchen is zucchini. So I want to share with you how to use extra zucchini in the kitchen. And now I have two different types of zucchini that I'm using. One, I have frozen zucchini that I preserved from last year that I got at a farmer's market. And this year I have zucchini in my garden. So I'm picking a couple zucchini every single morning out of my garden. So right now for these chicken muffins, which is essentially like a little mini chicken casserole, I am using up some of that frozen zucchini from last year. When you shred and freeze zucchini, it gets pretty watery, so I am just draining it and then I'm adding it into a bowl with some chicken that I slow cooked recently, eggs, and some freeze-dried onion powder. And then I'm also just mixing in a few other ingredients, a little bit of mayo, some flour, salt, pepper. Really, you kind of can't go wrong here. You can add in whatever you want. Oh yeah, and cheese, of course, plenty of cheese. So back to that freeze-dried onion powder though, that stuff is my secret weapon right now in the kitchen. So freeze-dried onion powder is actually just dried raw onions. They are not cooked. And when you add them into food, they rehydrate with the juices from the other food and it creates the best flavor. So I don't know if I can even go back to regular old school onion powder. I'm going to put together a more formal recipe for this and publish it on my blog soon, so stay tuned for that. But I'm just taking this mixture and putting it into little muffin cups and baking it. I baked these at 350 for about 15 minutes. Then I took them out and topped them with a little more cheese and put them back in the oven until the cheese was melted. And these were really good. And these are so versatile too. So maybe you don't have a bunch of zucchini right now. You could throw in some broccoli, whatever veggies you have. And these are really great for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. So it's a versatile recipe that can be eaten any time of day. My husband really liked these for breakfast. Freezing zucchini is a really good way to preserve your summer harvest, or if you find a bunch of zucchini at the farmer's market. In fact, just like the peaches, last year I got this zucchini from a local farm at a discounted price because I bought a lot of it. And freezing it is a really easy way to preserve it. You don't have to really worry about, of course, canning it or any sort of like botulism or anything like that. You just shred it, squeeze some of the liquid out, and then put it in a freezer safe bag and pop it right in the freezer. I try not to freeze too much for food preservation because we live in a hurricane area and every single year we lose power. A number of years ago, our community lost power for a few weeks. So when hurricane season gets here, I freeze some things that I wouldn't be like heartbroken if I lost it, but it's not the best way for me to preserve food this time of year. But with that said, I do have frozen zucchini that we did not lose in any power outages last year, and I'm going to make, of course, zucchini bread with it. And this is a sourdough zucchini bread. If you are not a sourdough person, you can totally make any zucchini bread recipe. It's a great way to use up frozen zucchini if you have it. Or of course, you can just shred your fresh zucchini and use that too. If you do want to convert your favorite regular zucchini bread recipe into a sourdough recipe, it's very easy. So all you need to do is weigh out the amount of starter that you want to use. I recommend somewhere around 100 grams or so. Then you need to subtract the amount of flour and water that's in your starter from the recipe. Most people keep their starter at 100% hydration, meaning that it is equal parts flour and water. So that means if you have 100 grams of starter, that you have 50 grams of flour and 50 grams of water in your starter. So you need to subtract 50 grams of flour from the recipe and 50 grams of water. But what makes this tricky is not every recipe, like this one, for example, has water. The liquid comes from the oil and the egg and the vanilla, so I can't subtract the water. The liquid also comes from the zucchini, and this is actually where I think I made a little bit of a mistake. So I added starter to this recipe and I squeezed the shnikes out of that zucchini and got all the water out, and my bread was a little bit dry. You can even tell when I'm pouring the batter into the bread pan that it's a little bit dry. So you do have to rely a little bit on your experience and expertise if you want to convert recipes, particularly if they don't have water or milk, for example, in them. But an even easier solution, Google a sourdough zucchini bread recipe and voila. That's all you have to do. You can follow the instructions. There's some great recipes out there on the internet. I do not have a sourdough zucchini bread recipe on my site yet, maybe one day in the future, but in the meantime, there are lots of great ones out there. Now, just because it was dry doesn't mean it wasn't good. It was especially good warm with a little bit of butter. So this was a really delicious bread. It wasn't a perfect zucchini bread, but it is helping me clear out some space in my freezer for when it is time to put other things in there. I do like to preserve some stuff in the freezer. I know I said that I don't like to do too much in the summer, which is true, but I will probably do zucchini again. I like to freeze peppers from my garden, onions sometimes, herbs, those sorts of things. So I'm really just trying to clean things out. And in the process, I also get to eat some delicious zucchini bread. So it's really a win-win no matter which way you slice it. Okay, I am switching gears to using up zucchini from our garden. So I think I mentioned recently on a YouTube video about how we have not historically had a lot of luck with zucchini in our garden, but this year I switched up the variety of zucchini that I'm growing. I switched to Dunja, Green Machine, and Golden Glory, and we are getting a lot of zucchini, plenty for our family of 3. And one of my all-time favorite ways to make zucchini is turning them into loaded zucchini boats. So they're kind of like a loaded potato skin, but using zucchini instead of a potato. And what I like about this recipe is I can use some of the leftover parts for the recipe I'm going to share with you in just a few minutes. So what I'm doing first then is I am cooking bacon and rendering out all the fat. I'm not using the fat for this recipe. I'll use it in a little bit, but I'm cooking that bacon until it's nice and crispy and then just setting it aside. In the meantime, I am just chopping up the zucchini. Now, some of our zucchini are huge. So some of them I cut lengthwise and then crossways, and then others I just cut lengthwise and scooping out the center flesh of them. Now, to scoop that out, I find that a grapefruit spoon works really well. And then once I get all that center flesh taken out, I'm just setting it aside to use in a little bit for another dinner recipe. Really, you can stuff these with anything you want. I've seen these with rice and even with meat. I'm just using a little bit of cheese and some bacon and then just some garnish on top. So here I'm just shredding up a little bit of cheddar cheese, and then I am seasoning the zucchini and baking them. So here's my secret weapon again, freeze-dried onion powder, a little bit of paprika, salt, and pepper. Again, you really can't go wrong here. Just use your favorite spices to flavor them. Meanwhile, I also have my baking stone in the oven preheating. I find that when I put vegetables on a nice hot baking sheet, they just cook a little bit better. They have a more even cook to them and they actually just cook a little faster. So these just go in the oven then at 400 for about 10 minutes until they are tender enough to pierce with a fork. While that is in the oven, I am out in the garden just finding some herbs that will pair nicely with cheese and bacon on a loaded zucchini boat. Now, the type of herbs that you would use really depends on what you're stuffing it with, but in this case, I use chives and parsley, and honestly, I don't think you can ever really go wrong with chives and parsley on just about anything. I've said this a lot on YouTube over the last few weeks, maybe even a couple of months, that if you want to start growing your own food, a really great and easy way to do that is with herbs. They are so simple to grow and they add so much flavor to your food. After about 10 minutes, I'm now loading up the zucchini with some shredded cheese and then putting them back into the oven until the cheese is melted. It only takes about 5 minutes or so. And then once they are ready, I load them up with all the things you would want on a loaded zucchini boat. Some chopped up bacon. I have a little bit of ranch that I added gorgonzola to. I actually showed this on one of my clean out meal videos recently. I'll leave a link for that in the description box below. But I added a little gorgonzola to the ranch, put that on there, and the fresh herbs. And this is one of our favorite early summer meals. It's great for an appetizer, but also if you serve it with a salad, for example, it can make a delicious full meal. And last up on the early summer menu is a Hawaiian pork with gravy. And I am making this in my Instant Pot, which I actually do not cook much in my Instant Pot. But after making this, I kind of have rekindled my little love affair with the Instant Pot because it was really fast. For this, I am taking some of that rendered bacon fat from the zucchini boats and putting it into the Instapot and putting it on the saute function. Now, I have not had a lot of luck with the saute function, the Instant Pot. Every single time I put it on high, it overheats. I don't know why. So I'm putting it on low, which actually isn't really hot enough to sear the pork tenderloin, but it did cook it a little bit. So what I did is I just put it on low as best I could, seared that pork tenderloin and took it out. Then I added a little more of that bacon fat into the Instant Pot, and then I cooked the onion in that fat and some of the juices that came out of the tenderloin when I was partially searing it. This recipe will be on my blog over at moonandmagnolia.com very soon, so stay tuned for that. When it's live, I'll put that in the description box below. But then I also added in about a half a can of pineapple to that cooked onion, put the tenderloin back into the Instant Pot, and now I have some basil. I don't know what happened to my basil plant. Something broke it, so I'm just using it up when I can, and it was very good with the fresh basil. So I put fresh basil on there, making a little bit of sauce, putting that on top of the pork with the rest of the pineapple, and then voila, all of that zucchini that I took out for the loaded zucchini skins, I'm putting in there just to use them up. The thing is with growing your own food, once you spend all this time and your own resources and energy into growing it, you really don't want to waste it. So I just put it right on in there. This took about 12 minutes in the Instant Pot, and then I'm taking everything out, the pork and all the pineapple, the basil, and leaving the juice in the Instant Pot. The sauce I made that I cooked the pork in was a combination of soy sauce, wine vinegar, mustard, honey, and some spices. I'll have that recipe on moonandmagnolia.com soon, but really you could put any ingredients in there to create sort of like a soy-based sweet sauce. And then I brought it to a boil and mixed it with the cornstarch slurry to make a gravy. Technically, it might be more of a sauce, but I like to call it a gravy because gravy is delicious. This was really good, and I ended up serving it with some white rice with the sauce, and it was delicious and so fast to make. And it used up some of those other ingredients that I had, like the bacon fat and the leftover zucchini. That's what's cooking in our early summer kitchen, and I hope this has inspired you to think of ways to utilize early summer ingredients, visit your farmer's market, grow a little bit of food, and enjoy summer. I hope you're off to a great early summer, and thanks so much for stopping by.